Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin, and this is episode 304. I am not joined today by my co-host Prez, who has abandoned me. He is living his best life, and I am here to pick up the slack while he's doing such things. No, I actually have no idea what Prez is doing. He's probably on a fucking vacation somewhere. But while he's doing all that, I am joined by not a first-time guest of the pod, but first time in a little while. You know him as at YC on Twitter. YC, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I hope Prez is all right. Seems like you don't know his whereabouts, which is a little concerning. But other than that, I'm good.
Oh no, he's fine. I don't know his whereabouts, but he's fine. He's fine.
Okay. He's just being very squirrely about it, like secretive about his whereabouts.
Yeah. He might be in California. He might be in Mexico. Nobody knows where Prez is. But before we get started talking about the basket sports, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has a Instagram, which you can subscribe to. That is at thestrick.land on Instagram. We're posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you haven't done so already, please hit like and then subscribe to the channel. That would be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website. We've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, mugs, even water bottles, anything you want. We probably have on there, so check that out. And then finally, the Strickland has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There is a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland mailbag that comes out every other week, hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, a.k.a. the Doug Bag, alongside Dallas Amico. You also get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And all of this is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your championship finals info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports for this year's NBA and Stanley Cup finals. BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your insider sports wagering needs, from basketball and hockey to MLB, UFC, and boxing. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your home. Get into the action today. Head to the website or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. So there is basketball still ongoing. We don't talk about that. I can't believe this fucking Heat team. I'm so annoyed by them. They have like so much evil devil magic. Like, it's insane, the levels of bullshit that I've had to watch from them this postseason. It's very infuriating that I swear every single time they're down 12, I'm just like, they're going to hit like fucking 3 straight threes right now. The other team's going to commit the stupidest fucking turnovers that make no sense. They'll probably miss layups. Michael Porter Jr. will take a shot with 3 defenders on him while there are 3 guys underneath the hoop wide open. I'm so sick of them. I hate watching this team. I hate watching. I really need Denver to win this series. Like, not even from a financial perspective. I can't do the Miami thing anymore. After they won game 2, I don't know if this happened to you, but the next day, wake up, taking my morning shit, peacefully scrolling through the timeline, and I just see 15 tweets that are just Bucks fans thought we were over. Knicks fans, we were the favorites. The Knicks were favorites against us. This is such a testament to Heat culture, and it's there's this is why Miami's the destination for all these veterans, and I'm just if I have to deal with an entire summer of like Heat culture is the greatest thing of all time, I'm gonna fucking lose it. I can't do it. I just can't do it.
I mean, with credit due, it just feels unfair if they win a championship with what seems like the Lucky Charms most lucky run that any team in professional sports has ever gone. They have like 3 or 4 of the top like 8 shooting performances of all time in the playoffs, like just this year. It's just so unbelievable. And like credit due, like they put themselves in position, they turned it on, you know, all of that. But it just would feel unfair. It's like you said, it's like you're watching the game and, you know, they go down, they're down 15, and then it's like, wait, did Jokic's pants fall down? And like just something inexplicable happens, and then they pull it out.
It is. I've never seen anything like this. It's absolutely bananas. I think the other part that's actually really annoying too is like you mentioned, they've had like all these insane shooting performances as a team, but then like you'll get, you know, you'll just see these tweets where it's like, oh, like, you know, I forgot, was it Jay Williams last week that was like, oh, this is like the biggest
never
carry
seen someone
job.
Carrying,
Yeah. I was like, what are you watching? Like, I actually, and I think that's actually what makes it even more annoying is there is like a way to talk about this Heat team that like even as a Knicks fan who will always hate the Heat, I would be like, yeah, that's actually true, and like I can respect. But it's like the levels that it goes to and the way they discuss these things, it gets talked about in the most annoying, like possible ways that I'm like, I don't need to, like, I don't need us to, can we stop pretending that Jimmy Butler is like on some, you know, like 93 Jordan run or something like that's not what's happening. And all I'll say though is this is like credit, they do deserve credit, but like Eric Spoelstra, I think there was that report where it was like, oh, he might get 20 million a year. Give him like 50 million a year. Like that man is just, he's worth every penny. And that's one that's like obviously a part of the league that's not capped. So whatever you can give it, like, let me tell you, don't let him. If he's smart, he should hit the open market because he will make some, like, I don't know who it would be. I mean, if he's heading into the open market, because I think his contract expires after next year. And you know, maybe this is like a good place to start our discussion point, is like things that could kind of like, I think this is going to be a kind of a, not, I want to say pivotal offseason in the NBA, but it feels like there's a lot of shoes that could drop. And I do wonder about like the Spoelstra thing, because I know last year, before Portland hired Billups, they had made an aggressive push to, I think it was 2 years ago, but they made an aggressive push to try to hire Spoelstra to get him out of Miami. Obviously that didn't happen. But he hasn't signed a new contract. It is an expiring contract heading into next season. And I just feel like he's in such a strong position, regardless of whether they win or lose the series, where it's like, he's one of those rare coaches that, you know, he can enter a lame duck coaching season and he's going to have all the authority in the world over his team and no one can say shit to him. And it's like, I just wonder, like, what number does Miami have to go to for him to just be like, okay, yeah, I'm signing the contract right now?
I think that he should definitely let his contract expire. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think just the leverage of it would be enough, and living in Miami and the Florida taxes and all that. Unless he like hates DeSantis maybe or something. I don't know. But that's like not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, it's not.
Or he wants to try something new challenge type thing. But I think they just have to kind of they probably have to make him the highest paid coach in professional, like the big 4 sports in America, probably.
Yeah, I think Belichick gets
by a few million. Yeah. I mean, and I like you said, I was like, give him 50. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, he's proven he is worth every penny. He's like the best coach there is. But going back to what you're saying about the carry job, like thing that Jay Williams of all people was talking about, Jimmy Butler he hasn't seen someone carry his team like ever, like Jimmy Butler has. The weird thing about that conversation is, it feels like not only does he get credit for the rest of his team not being that great and not having like a bunch of name guys, even though the team is a good team, it's almost as if he gets credit for that because he's not as good a player as LeBron. So somehow Jimmy Butler not being as good as LeBron makes it seem like this carry job is better than LeBron did. And it's like, or better than Jordan did, or better than all these all-time greats, because there's somehow like including Jimmy Butler being on that like next level of superstar as like he's carrying himself. Like I don't understand the logic of giving him credit for a carry job just because LeBron James is like a much better basketball player, you know?
Yeah, it's honestly one of the weirdest things. And then it's like, I don't know if you saw this. I actually go back and look at this tweet now every like once a day because it's so funny. There's like this tweet by ESPN and it was like they had 2 pictures of Jimmy Butler sitting on the sideline in the fourth quarter smiling. And it was just like, oh, Jimmy Butler smiling in the fourth quarter, got to be studied. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, what are we studying?
Jimmy Butler coded, he's goated or whatever words, like, and he's just standing there. He's just existing.
Yeah, it's just okay. Jimmy Butler is alive. Like, great.
Yes.
Amazing achievement here. Yeah, no, I mean, I think he should I think Spoelstra definitely should let the contract expire. I do wonder, like, you know, so much of this stuff is always about wanting to feel like there's upward mobility. And I have no idea if he wants, you know, personnel control. I have no idea what his aspirations are in that sense. But, I mean, that's all really that's left for him, right? Like, there's no upward mobility aside from that. You know, if I'm him, I'm probably trying to see if I can I get an ownership stake. I have no idea what the CBA rules are that. Can I get an ownership stake? I'd ask for an ownership stake if I were fucking him. I mean, Pat Riley did it, right? When he left New York to go to Miami, he got an ownership stake. Take a page out of your boss's book. And look, like Riley's, what is he, like fucking, he's like 95 years old. God knows how many poor souls he's had to suck through his vampire teeth to stay alive. But like, I mean, you have to think at some point Riley's like, all right, like I'm fucking old as hell. Like
succession plan or something.
Yeah, right. Like, so whether it's, you know, there's a definitive date or it's like agreed upon or whatever, where it's kind of like, look, I'll step aside and you're going to come up to the top spot. I don't know if he wants to balance both those things. I would probably assume you wouldn't want to. But like, is that something he wants to transition to, or is he content on the sidelines? I don't know. I think that's pretty interesting because if he does want that spot, right, the president of basketball operations or whatever, but he doesn't want to coach anymore, that actually would be really, really interesting because we know that he is the best coach in the league, or at least in that conversation. I think he's very clearly the best coach in the league. But like, it's like the Peter principle, right? Where it's like, okay, if you're paying him because he's the best coach in the league, that's fine. But if you're paying him because he's the best coach in the league, but he's not going to be coaching anymore, and he's actually going to transition to this front office role, which is what he's like kind of aiming for, I'm not like, then it changes how you view that. We're just talking like none of us knows what the fuck Spo wants, you know, what he's planning. But I do think that's like an interesting thing to consider given, I mean, how old is Pat Riley? He's got to be like 80 something.
He's
right?
got to be like 80 or at least in his like late
70s. 78.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you've got to think all this stuff is, if not, you know, under consideration, it's definitely like in the back of people's minds within the Heat organization, I'm sure.
And it feels like it's such a strange thing too, because it's like a lot of front offices are, and I imagine Miami is the same. It's such a collaborative process that a lot of it is kind of title, and there would be other people doing the day-to-day. If he wanted to coach and have personnel control, like he could do that. I'm sure they'd let him, especially if Riley was stepping aside. I'm not sure how much Riley is involved in the day-to-day anymore, honestly, or if he's just like a CEO type figure, just in the sense that, you know, he wrote all these like books and kind of is a management guru type from the 90s. Like that's kind of his persona a little bit. I don't know if he's involved in the day-to-day as much. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it really just comes down here to that Spo's in a position where he can essentially just get whatever he wants, unless I'm missing something or something drastic happens in Miami. I feel like he's beloved. He's still very young. He has like everything going for him as far as leverage.
Yeah. I mean, this finals run obviously probably happened at like the perfect time for him. Not that I doubt it would have been an issue either way, but it almost like reinforces it because obviously there were a lot of questions about Miami throughout the season. I mean, rightfully so. And I don't think, honestly, I didn't think those questions had anything to do with Spo, because when I was watching them during the regular season, I was just like, yeah, like I don't know if another coach in the NBA has this team at like 500. Like I don't even
Right.
know that. So it was never about that, but it's like, you know, he takes this team and it's just like he just always finds a fucking way to take whatever he's given and elevate it to a level that it has no business being at. I mean, you go back to that Celtics series, and it's like, you know, like the Knicks series, I really don't want to like revisit that and talk about that. I really feel like the Knicks pissed that away in multiple ways. And I will say this though, like I've criticized Tibbs a lot for his coaching that series, and I do think like a lot of that is justified. But like you do have to give him credit for the fact that the Knicks are the one team in this fucking playoffs that's managed to hold them down offensively. I think the most points they scored in a game in that series was 111, I want to say, and that was that was game one. But like they actually held down Miami quite well. So they do deserve credit for that. But like, yeah, like, you know, that Celtics series, I don't know how you feel about this, but like I know the Celtics were not like some perfect roster, because is there ever a perfect roster? But like I thought they were the most talented team in the NBA. At least, and for sure, I felt like, you know, 1 to 9, 1 to 10, they're the most talented team left in that Final Four. And for them to lose, and I know it ended up being a 7-game series, but like, was that the worst 7-game series ever? Like, I don't know. It was so bizarre. And for them to lose, it's almost even worse. Like they got it back to game 7 and then they went out the way they did. I just like, I don't know, that when you watch that, you're just like, this guy, I don't know how he's getting his team to to match up with these dudes. You're giving up size at almost every position. Like it's just wild to me. But yeah, I mean, look, the Celtics are actually another team here that kind of has, I mean, one of the teams that probably has some of the biggest decisions facing them this offseason, especially with the new CBA and everything coming in, how that's going to affect them down the line. They have the Jaylen Brown thing coming out, coming to a head here. He obviously made the All-NBA team, as did Jason Tatum. Both of them are eligible now for supermaxes. Jaylen Brown can sign his this offseason. There's all kinds of smoke with him. Like, you know, like, should they give him the supermax? If he doesn't get the supermax, can they keep him? Does he even want to stay? Because they offered him for KD last year and he was not happy about that. Where do you, I guess, from Boston's perspective, where do you come down on just like, okay, you're gonna give Tatum the supermax for sure. I don't think there's a question about that. That's like $60 million. That's like a $60 million a year contract. It's a little bit over, I think, for him actually on average. Jaylen Brown's I think his supermax is 5 years, 295, so just under $60 million a year. It's $59 million a year average. Do you are you doing that if you're Boston?
My gut says I'm not doing that. I just don't think, like, my initial feeling on it is, and I will caveat this, but my initial feeling on it is you don't do that. You offer him a regular max and you try to put the team together. I'm not in the camp of this playoffs was indicative of some deep problem where they have to blow everything up. So first of all, I'm not doing that. I would not give him the supermax because it just seems like, from everything we keep hearing about the CBA, it's getting more and more punitive to like spend money, keep your players, yes, but it's going to be harder and harder to build the team. We see what's happening with draft capital and people like making trades, and it's just going to be harder and harder and harder to like build a team if you have two 60 million guys. The caveat is that in the past few years, and again, a different CBA, we've seen that every untradeable contract has been traded. So on the one hand, I think that like it would be really hard to have the supermax thing going. But one thing that I've always said about the league that's different than the league of like the late 90s, early 2000s is what really killed teams back in the day was the length of contracts, not the year-to-year salary. It was like the Rafe LaFrentz 7-year deals that would like cripple your team. You know what I mean? Like, and now the NBA has kind of really saved all the teams from themselves by just, you're not able to give a guy, 7-8 years anymore. So on one hand, or 7 years is probably the max actually when they pulled it back.
I still remember with the Knicks signing Jamal Crawford. They got the Jamal Crawford to sign and trade. It was 7 years, $56 million. And it's like
$6 million, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, at that time you were like, that like 7 years? Like, is that like, that's 2011. That's when that expires.
Yeah, and it just gives you this. I think when back then too, it used to be like at 56 million. Even back then, it was like a good amount of money, but it was more just the fact that it was 7 years, and it was because the front offices. You think I'm a genius, and I know that if I get this guy in our team on our team in our house, he's going to blow up, and this is going to look like a steal in year 5. And it's like it never works out that way. It just never does. Right. But my instinct is just that. It's hard without looking at the specifics, but I also just am not sure. I guess the other caveat is I'm not sure how much giving Jaylen Brown a max versus a super max would help you in the team building. Because if you're stuck, you're stuck. Like if you're capped out, you're capped out. So maybe it doesn't matter, but it just doesn't feel. My gut tells me that I would try to avoid doing that. And then if he's really hard line about getting the super max, I'm not sure how serious he wants to stay. So maybe that sways your decision a little bit. I'm not sure.
The one thing too with Jaylen Brown, like, and I don't know, like, so we've seen the Celtics team, obviously, they've been together for Brown and Tatum have been together since at least 2017. I think Brown was a rookie in 2016. Like, they're really good. Okay, again, it's fun to troll. Like, I honestly, like, it's very fun to troll the Celtics. It's probably the one good thing about Miami beating them was like, at least it came at the expense of Boston. But like, you know, this, and I think this all came to a head somewhere in like the mid 2010s. I think it was after like that Heat team, obviously, right? The Heatles with LeBron and Wade, where there was this whole concept of like, you don't actually need point guards and like, you just get a bunch of wings and like, if you have wings, that's all that matters. And like, we saw obviously the Clippers also go all in on this with kind of the Kawhi PG moves that they made. And you look at everything they've done since then, how many point guards that they bounced through, right? Reggie Jackson, John Wall, fucking Pat Bev, like they've gone through so many. They traded for Bones Highland, like they're just trying to find that guy that can put them in the right spots. And I think with Boston, like obviously we've seen them try to find the right point guard, right? So it's like they get Isaiah Thomas, okay. That wasn't quite enough. So you're like, okay, let's get Kyrie. Let's trade for Kyrie. They get Kyrie. Look, we're going to talk about Kyrie later because Kyrie has definitely inserted himself into the NBA offseason. But Kyrie, like, obviously that didn't work out because Kyrie does crazy Kyrie things. And so then they move on from Kyrie. They bring in Kemba. Kemba doesn't work because Kemba's cooked, as we also saw in New York. Right. And then they move on from Kemba, and then they actually just commit to Marcus Smart. Yeah. And they commit to Marcus Smart, but then they bring in Derek White, right? And then they lose in the finals. They're like, you know, we need a little bit more dribble penetration, so they bring in Malcolm Brogdon. And it's just like they're constantly searching for the right point guard. And what I wonder, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, I wonder if you're just never going to get the right point guard, or that it's very, very difficult to find the right point guard to make the Brown and Tatum pairing work at those highest levels. Like, look, we're talking about a team that they lost in 6 games in the finals last year. I would say that they were, again, a more talented overall team in that series. Steph went Steph mode, and that was that. But like, I thought they had the better roster. I thought they had the better roster this year against Miami. I thought they had the better roster in 20 in the bubble when they lost to Miami in 2020 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, I think they've had a stronger roster in a lot of these years where they haven't quite come out on top. And I just wonder if that says something about how hard it is to find a point guard that can really get the most out of Brown and Tatum while having the authority and ability to dictate the offense in those end of game moments. Because what we see so often with Boston in a lot of these big games at the end of, fourth quarters and halves and stuff is it just gets very stagnant. Brown and Tatum just ISO, and it's like there's not it just feels like very forced, and it actually feels like a disservice to Tatum and Brown where you're asking them, like, you're basically like, be LeBron. And it's like, be Jordan. And it's like, those guys are who they were because they are above and beyond even the elite players at their position. They transcend what those players are even capable of. And what I guess I wonder is like, if you trade Brown and now Tatum is your number one wing scorer, and let's just live in a hypothetical world here, and we can use this to transition to another team eventually. But like, let's say you can make a deal for Damian Lillard, right? Like that requires Brown going out, whatever. But like, does that work better because we know that Damian Lillard at the end of a fourth quarter, like he's a point guard you can trust in those moments, and who has, I think, the gravitas to be like to either one make a decision to set Tatum up, or just be like, hey, I got this. Like, you're good. I got this right now. And I just want, like, because I feel like what they're really looking for is the type of point guard that Kyle Lowry was at his best, where it's like a guy that can be like, not your, like a third scorer, not be a ball dominant scorer, play good defense, right? Smart gives you some of the defensive stuff, although I think he's fallen off on that end. But like, he's nowhere near what Lowry was capable of in those bigger moments at the end of games as a creator. And I just feel like there's not a lot of guards like that. I mean, I don't know if there is a point guard that you could point to right now in the league that you'd be like, oh, he could be that version of that guy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's hard without a specific example, because while you were saying all this, I was trying to think of one, and it was hard to come up with one. But I do think that like Lillard is like the high end version of what you're talking about, and like what they would thrive with potentially. And I think that even if you don't send Brown out, like my mind went to needing like a veteran point guard in the non-cooked division of veteran point guard. So it's not just about, because part of it is even position aside, part of it I always think about with Boston is like your team's built around, two wing guys, Tatum and Brown. They've been together a long time. They are your star players. They're very good players. They're still very young and still, like you said, seem to have problems with crunch time playoff situations or organizational things. And like, you can't just necessarily give them the ball and they'll make 100% the right decision every time, like a LeBron or something like that. Tatum, for example, seems like so many times when it's just like very obvious to everyone else around you that he can just get to the basket at will. He's settling for jumpers.
It's so easy for him sometimes too. And you're just like, I don't understand what goes through your brain.
Why you don't spam that until they can stop it or something, like what the issue is. But anyway, it does feel like Kyle Lowry is a good example, like prime Kyle Lowry is a good example, because it feels like if you can just get a veteran guy who is not rattled, whether it's actual mental rattled or just he's a good player who's not rattled in those situations and who can organize them, and he's not cooked. He can score. He can organize the team. He can pass. He can play make. If you can get some kind of veteran guy, and the other thing too is like, how do you acquire that guy though? Because it feels like you'd have to run into some luck with like a buyout candidate who catches fire, like a Kevin Love type Miami Heat situation, but for point guards. Like, you'd have to just have it's a hard thing to get. Like, those guys aren't growing on trees, obviously, but it does feel like the answer for me isn't necessarily that you need like a star of like a Damian Lillard caliber. You just need a guy who you can put the ball in his hands and at the end of games and in tight situations and kind of can rally the team. It just feels like Tatum and Brown are so good that I think people overrate their leadership abilities or their abilities to thrive in the clutch or feel like they should be further along in terms of that development, but they are still very young. And it just like, they might need a veteran guy to be that guy before they can truly become that guy in like year 10 when they're still only like 28, 29. You know what I mean?